Let me start this book review with a bold claim. If I could buy a copy of this book for every adult believer I know, if I could afford to do that, I would. Let me say that again as that sinks in. If I could afford to buy a copy of this book for every adult believer I know, I would. Now, you probably know what the book is already from the title of the video, but let me reiterate that. The book is Redeeming Your Time by Jordan Raynor, with the subtitle 7 Biblical Principles for Being Purposeful, Present and Wildly Productive. Whether you're a stay-at-home parent, whether you are work in a voluntary capacity, whether you are in paid work, whatever that be, this is the most helpful book I've ever read on using our time wisely for God. It takes us through those 7 principles, and let me just read those to you now. The first is that we are to start with the word. We are to start with God's word. The second is let your yes be yes. The third is dissent from kingdom noise. The fourth is prioritize your yeses. So we've let our yeses be yes, but let's prioritize our yeses. The fifth is accept our unipresence, accept that we can only be in one place at one time. The sixth is to embrace productive rest. And the seventh is to eliminate all hurry. Jordan takes us through this toolkit for living with redeemed time. He talks about the Bible verse where it says, the days are evil. Redeem your time because the days are evil. And how that command to redeem our time can be played out. On the back it says, manage your time the way Jesus managed his. And it looks at biblical principles and it looks at God's word and it sees how Jesus managed his time, but then it really practically enables us to use tools from the 21st century to redeem our time. It talks a lot about our workflows, about the psychology behind open loops, which is all the things that we have in our heads or in our emails or wherever it is where we think, I must get around to that. So his example is he now has 3 children. I must replace the picture above the piano. That also includes all of our 3 children. Now we have 3 children. Things like that. It talks about defining our work. It talks about having a commitment tracking system. So we have a way of knowing what it is we've got to do, and recommends an app that I'm currently having a play with and I think is really going to be useful. I think time will tell whether I choose that particular app that he recommends, mainly because it has a cost implication. But currently I'm finding that really helpful. It then, in further chapters, takes you through a way of chunking up your work day and your work calendar, whether that's on paper or a Google Calendar or however it works, and allows you to take you through a workflow each day that helps you be more productive at work. It uses a lot of psychology, does this book. It uses a lot of principles that Jesus followed that are backed up in scientific discovery since then. The need for sleep and rest that we hear about in the Sabbath, we see in Jesus' life. We know with medical results how important that is now. And there are many examples of that, the psychology that has arrived that shows that the way Jesus modeled to us use of time is not only God's design, but is, and for our best, but is medically God's design and medically for our best. And that's really great. And this book's probably one of the most practical ones I've read so far. I spent a lot of time opening it up with a pencil or with my phone or with my diary or with my laptop and really digging into those things. And I think that's been really good. I think you could very easily read this and go, yeah, I'll apply it at some point, and never do. And actually, I think it's really important that you do. Let me read you a couple of extracts that have been really helpful. Again, another book where I've turned over lots of corners, as most of them have been. But let me just find you some examples. As I say, there's lots of practical stuff in there. So a lot of you will probably have seen this diagram before of whether something is urgent and important, non-urgent and important, non-important and urgent, and non-important and non-urgent. And there are lots of examples like that from all over, examples of business books and strategy books and all of those things that he's brought together with God's word, and how we can take the best from secular books about managing our time and using our work well, and showing how there are flaws in those, but also how there are great positives that mirror God's word as well. So there's that one, and there are lots of other bits and bobs looking at objectives, how we create objectives, how we look at those, how we decide what we're going to do with those. There's lots of helpful diagrams in these books to help you flesh out what it is he's talking about and work it out for yourself. And it's just super practical. I found it really helpful. And I would highly recommend you give it a read if you can. And it asks us to ask lots of questions of ourselves. So one of them is, which problem, once solved, is going to make the most of my other problems, is going to make most of my other problems either easier to solve or disappear entirely? And how that question in itself can help us decide whether what we prioritise in our day-to-day job lists. It helps us to think, oh, actually, some of these things we don't need at all. And as I say, plenty of diagrams and things like that in it. This book, along with all of Jordan Raynor's books, also you can log in to his website, set up an account, and there are practical things and more explanations and videos that go along with this book that help you work through in a bit more detail some of the things you want to put into place. It helps you sort of work through worksheets or whatever it is to take it a bit slower. So once you've got the concepts here, you can put them into place in your life. And I, by no stretch of the imagination, will be there yet. This book has multiple principles in it, and 36, I believe, practices. And so 7 principles, 36 practices. That is a lot and very life-changing. He says you're not going to be able to do it overnight, and that's really humble. He says it's taken him 10 years to get these things in place, and that if we move forward with those, the Lord will use them and the Lord will use us. There are some great biographical examples of Wilberforce and others in the way that the Lord has used them and helped them with productivity. And what's great about this book is it doesn't say, do this, do this, do this, do this. It says, first, come to God, keep praying, keep lifting it to him. It's his wisdom. He wants you to spend time listening to God. He wants you to spend time with God, hearing from him, reading his word, talking to him through prayer, and just being with him and meditating on his word. And there are really helpful practical tips for quiet times in here. There are really helpful practical tips for work in the workplace or in the home, whatever that looks like. Get a copy of this book. I really mean it. There's a link below in the video. It's quite an expensive one, but get it, read it, pore over it, and redeem your time for Jesus Christ. Over and out.